no regrets, no confusion. There'll be no pollution. I'm so thankful I've decided to change my ways.
Welcome back to the Leaving Eden podcast, part 4, Revelation. Here we go.
Let's do it.
We are talking today mainly, if you aren't familiar, we've done 3 parts of a many-part series about the book of Revelation, the end times, the rapture, prophecies, the different interpretations of that. By the way, my name is Gabriel Hacohen, and I'm here with my BFF, cult expert, cult survivor, Sadie Carpenter.
Hello. If
you didn't know, sorry, I'm a little disorganized. This is part 4 of our series on that. You might want to go back and check out parts 1, 2, and 3 before you listen to this one. Last time when we left off, we were talking about the trumpet judgments, and we got through the trumpet judgments, and we're now into the bowl judgments of the book of Revelation, and we're mainly talking about a futurist, a premillennial interpretation, the beliefs about this book and the rapture and the end of days that are held by the vast majority of the IFB, and also a large number of evangelical Christians in this country. This is largely an American belief, though.
Yes, and next episode is when I finally get to break that down for everybody.
Also, if you have a story that you want to share about what you believed is about the rapture growing up, maybe some
your personal rapture trauma.
Yeah, if you have a story about that, I think that sometime after Pride Month, so in July, maybe August, we're going to revisit this topic with some listener stories, because this is really a pretty prevalent issue. The rapture trauma, the being afraid that the entire world is going to end. What am I doing? Am I right with God? What's going to happen to me? What if I don't make it? That's pretty serious. And so we want to really get people's responses to that and get people's, experiences with that and put those on the show.
Yeah, well, we're going to do one of those, group deconstruction story time episodes after we take a nice long break from all of the tribulation stuff for the month of June.
Yes, and I can't wait for when we do Pride Month. We actually just recorded earlier this week. We recorded it in advance, an interview with one of our Pride Month guests. Should we say who that was, or should we?
I think we should tease it for now.
Okay, well, it's somebody who has recently come onto the scene doing podcasting about their experiences growing up in fundamentalism. It is somebody maybe half a generation younger than us, but somebody who we feel is a very good podcaster, and we had a fantastic conversation. It was, I don't know. I don't know how much more I can say, but that's going to be one of the things coming up for Pride Month. We have a couple of other episodes. I think one of the ones that we're going to do is, was Jesus gay? Was Jesus bi? As we're going to take a look at that, because there's some people that have opinions about that. So that's going to be that.
You really have to go watch Jesus Christ Superstar if we're going to talk about that.
I guess I'm going to have to. I mean,
yeah.
I guess I watched the Casa Bonita South Park episode in order to prepare for that one. But anyway, we're talking about the rapture today. But before we get into that, the Leaving Eden podcast is the podcast about my BFF and co-host, cult expert, cult survivor, Sadie Carpenter's life in and escape from the independent fundamental Baptist cult, the cult in which she was raised. We talk about this cult. We talk about other cults. We talk about religion. We talk about fundamentalism. We talk about the real and present threat that cults and cult ideologies pose to society as a whole. And it is our goal to promote freedom of mind, freedom of thought, and freedom of religion. So if you like our show, if you are a fan of our show, then there's some things that you can do to support us. You can join our Patreon. Patreon.com/Leaving Eden podcast, where you get extended, uncensored, ad-free versions of most of our episodes. Totally cool. If you want to support us financially, that's the best way to do it. You can also join our Facebook group and our subreddit. Those are both great places to have a good conversation with other people. We share religion memes, we share deconstruction stories. There's a lot of good conversation that goes on there. I've found it to be a pretty positive place generally. People are usually pretty respectful of one another in the Facebook group. So that's a good place to go. You can also check out our merch. We have new merch available. We have Rapture merch available. There's a shirt that says, "Please don't rapture me, I'm pooping, amen."
There is.
Check out on our Threadless shop, and the link to that is in the description. We also, I don't know if we'll have it by the time this episode comes out, but there should be Pride merch available. And I don't know what that is yet because I haven't designed it yet. But we're going to have Pride merch available, and the proceeds from Pride merch is going to go to some sort of LGBTQ plus charity, but we haven't decided what that is either.
Yeah, in the past, we have donated to Point of Pride, which is a fantastic organization that helps all different types of trans people get access to not only gender affirming healthcare, but also things like binders or laser hair removal that help them in their transitions.
I guess we just have to thank our patrons and then get into the show.
Let's do that.
So our patrons are, I gave it all to your patrons. Your names are I'm Not 1010, Kathleen Moncrief, Melissa Mosley, Melora King. Melissa Manown, excuse me. Yeah, Melissa got married, so she's Melissa Manown now. Melora King, Todd Dale, and our Faith Promise Missions to your patrons. Your names are Alex P., Allie Allen, Autumn of Our Discontent, Brittany, Chrissa Walker, Dora J., Eleanor Donahue, Hannah Ross, Hannah Montana, Hope Norum, Horton Here's a Shane, Janine Collin, Jana Connor, Jay Nichols. Jay Nichols is a brand new one. So thank you, Jay Nichols, for subscribing to our Faith Promise Missions tier of our Patreon. Jen Kaharski, Jessica Tambo, Jonna, Junie B. Jones, and the B stands for Bafflegab? Bafflegab. I don't know what that is, but cool. We have Kat Henwood, Kay Turwee, Kristen Marie, Learned Vixen, Linda Morgan, Madeline Antrim, Madeline Cusick, Maddie the Seventh Day Badventist, Marlena Stuve, Mary Martin, Megan Arndt, Morgan, Rob the Methodist, Stephanie Johnson, Steve and Amy, Susie, Tara McNamara, Wes the Cowboy, and Zoe Shuck. Zoe, I also think is a new one. Yeah. Welcome, Zoe. Can't wait to meet you guys when we have our next Faith Promise Missions and I Gave It All to Your Patrons hang out whenever we decide to do that. I think probably next month is a good time. We've both got a lot of crazy stuff going on in our lives and we have to be able to figure out a time to schedule it. But I think maybe for June, if we did a Pride Month themed one, that would be fun.
Yeah, we could do like a Pride Month kickoff party. Early June.
I would love to do that. That would be a ton of fun.
Oh, actually, June 1st is a Sunday.
Oh, okay.
That might be a good day. Or
cool.
Saturday. Yeah.
Sadie, do you want to do the TW and then we get into the episode?
In general, we talk about a lot of potentially triggering topics on this show, including but not limited to suicide and mental health, racism, misogyny, PTSD, and PTSD symptoms, child abuse, mental, physical, and sexual abuse, and spiritual abuse, including guilt, shame, and fear. In most episodes, we will mention at least a few of these topics, but we try to avoid any graphic detail unless it's absolutely necessary to the story that we're telling, and we do our best to give the audience a heads up if we are going to go into detail on any of these topics.
To recap what we've talked about, we've gotten through the first 15 chapters of the Book of Revelation. We are now on, we're on chapter 16, right? Or are we going to jump back a bit? Yeah.
I think we're going back a little bit because, hold on, we're going to chapter 12, I think.
The timeline is not consistent.
Oh,
it is not linear. But John of Patmos receives a vision from an angel, Jesus, we don't know. In this vision, he sees heaven, and in heaven is God, Jesus, an angel. I don't know, unclear. We don't know. There's many representations of Jesus, of angels. He sees an allegorical tale of the end times, Armageddon, what have you. And in this vision, there is a scroll with 7 seals, which are opened one at a time. These 7 seals are various conditions, various calamities, various events that will happen on earth just before Jesus returns, or during when Jesus returns, or unclear. when God gets to the seventh seal is actually, surprise, it's not a seventh seal, it's a 7 trumpet judgments. So then there's 7 trumpet judgments, which are also various calamities that befall the people on the earth. And where we left off, we had just finished the 6th trumpet judgment, and we were ready to get to the 7th trumpet judgment, which, surprise, surprise, is not another trumpet judgment. It is instead the bowl judgments, and God is preparing to throw his wrath down on the earth.
Correct. Good recap. So we are sitting right between that 6th and 7th trumpet, the 7th trumpet being the introduction to the bowl judgments. But before we get to the bowl judgments, there's another huge interlude where John sees a more esoteric, less specific vision. So there are several of these interludes. One of them that we talked about before is there was an angel standing with 1 foot on the land and 1 foot on the sea, and gave him a little book or a little scroll. And then he told John to eat the book or the scroll, and John ate it, and it tasted good in his mouth, but it made his stomach upset. So we're on another interlude like that even the extreme biblical literalists tend to take just a smidge less literally. So John saw, and it's, to their credit, it's clear in the text that this is supposed to be a vision, not a literal thing that John saw happening.
With the way that the biblical literalists interpret, the angel could literally say, this is an allegory, don't think about it too heavily. And they would still say, no, we're going to think about this heavily. This is like an extra credit assignment. We want to prove that we were good boys and we want to go the extra mile.
They do have a lot to say about all of these things. So John sees a vision, a great wonder in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun and with the moon under her feet is wearing a crown of 12 stars. She is in labor and just about to give birth. A red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on his 7 heads sweeps a third of the stars to earth with his tail and waits for the woman to give birth because the dragon wants to devour the child that she is going to give birth to. The woman gives birth to a boy who is destined to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child is caught up to God's throne to protect him from the dragon. The woman flees into the wilderness for 1,260 days, which is 3.5 years. There is a war in heaven. We talked about this in the Who is Satan Actually episode. The dragon is directly named in this passage as the devil and Satan, and it's clarified that he was cast out of heaven with his angels. So it is not a question who the dragon is. The dragon is the biblical character of Satan. And that also is an interesting table setting for this story, if that makes sense, because this vision that John is seeing kind of seems to take place outside of time. The dragon is the sweeping the third of the stars out of heaven with his tail and lying in wait for the woman to give birth to the child is framed as something that happens at the same time. And the fight, the battle in heaven where the devil is thrown out of heaven in this vision comes after the birth of this child, which is really interesting because people tend to interpret this child as being Jesus. But obviously, the war in heaven and Satan being thrown out of heaven canonically happens about 4,000 years before the birth of Jesus. So, confusing.
The way I was thinking about it was like, if I was watching a movie of this happening, then it would be like a flashback sequence.
Yes. But it's a flashback sequence run in reverse, almost.
How do you mean?
Because even within the flashback, the birth happens before Satan is thrown out of heaven. And in the actual story, Satan was thrown out of heaven before the Garden of Eden so that he could deceive Eve. And then Jesus was actually born 4,000 years later.
Right. No, but what I'm saying is if I'm watching this as a movie, like if I'm watching the woman and give birth to...
Okay. The birth is in real time and the getting thrown out of heaven is a flashback. I gotcha.
Yeah, just so that they can say, remember, this is who the devil, this guy is the devil here. This is the devil is the one that's chasing her.
This is kind of, what was that movie with Leonardo DiCaprio that confused everyone? What about dreams?
Was it Inception? Yeah.
This is like Inception in the Bible. So,
I mean, was that Christopher Nolan? I think that was Christopher. If Christopher Nolan wanted to make a movie of the Book of Revelation, then I would watch it.
I was still in the cult when that came out. We're out of the flashback where the devil gets thrown out of heaven, the dragon, and on earth, the dragon persecutes the woman who gave birth. So she has given birth. Her child has been caught up to God. He is destined to rule the earth with a rod of iron, but she is almost exiled to earth. The earth itself conspires against the dragon to keep her safe, and she is given the wings of an eagle so that she can fly away from the dragon. These are symbolic characters that people try to pin meanings onto, and this is going to continue through the next couple chapters. First, who is the woman in Revelation 12? Protestants and futurists most often say it is representative of the Jewish people because it was through Jewish bloodlines that Jesus was born. The persecution by the dragon represents all of Satan's efforts to destroy God's chosen people throughout history, including being enslaved in Egypt, all of that kind of thing. This interpretation is often connected with Joseph's dreams in Genesis, where you may remember that he dreamed that 11 stars and the sun and the moon bowed down to another star. So that's where the 12-star thing comes from. The Catholics tend to say, yeah, no, that's Mary, and the sun is Jesus. It's pretty obvious. And the dragon persecuting the woman is specific or particular efforts of Satan to specifically get to Jesus and his mother. For example, the massacre of the innocents when the Holy Family fled to Egypt.
Yeah, and the impression I got was from reading this. When I read this first time, I said, oh, the woman's clearly Jesus. I mean, the woman's clearly Mary, right? The kid's clearly Jesus. And she would have been running away from persecution because that was like a historical thing that had happened and was part of the story.
Right. And with going into the desert and being given the wings of an eagle, the wings of an eagle seems to be metaphorical, but the Holy Family literally went into the desert to get away from the Roman Empire, killing all the boys because they were trying to get Jesus. Canonically, that's exactly what happened.
John of Patmos, in reading this, he's not exactly subtle with his metaphors. It's very like on the nose. He's very like, this is who this is. I'm speaking in code, but you know who this is.
See, the only thing that makes this interpretation not perfect is that Mary is now associated in Catholic imagery with the sun and the moon, but that's because of this passage and the way this passage was interpreted by Catholic artists. There's not a scriptural special association between Mary and the sun and the moon or Mary and the number 12. It goes back to, well, it's the number of completion. It's a good number in the Bible. So I don't think that's a bad interpretation at all. It just is missing some layers of symbolism.
Right. And it would make sense if they were saying, oh, well, it's the Jewish people who are the
12 tribes, the sun and the moon, Joseph's dream.
Abraham and Sarah, when they came from the east into the land, they were, before making the pact, before Abraham made the binding covenant, I believe they were from a land that worshiped the moon god, or like a moon god.
Huh.
Before they discovered monotheism.
So the dragon is definitely identified as Satan. And I think nobody's really disputing that the child who is born is Jesus. People are just more asking, does that represent the Jewish people? Does that represent Mary? I absolutely see that. I believe that the dragon is also supposed to be related to the Roman Empire because of 7 heads and 10 horns, because Rome was built on 7 hills And 10 is a very significant number in Roman numerology and could refer to any group of 10 Caesars. And historically, around the time the Book of Revelation was written, there were a lot of Caesars in very quick succession who did not have very long ruling times. So associating with Rome, I think, is also a pretty obvious gimme in the situation.
A lot of Protestants, when they're trying to look for alternate interpretations, it's like when you hear a new rap song come out and you're looking for like the triple and the quadruple entendre for the lyric in it. But it makes, like, clearly to me, the thing that makes the most sense is the Roman Empire, because what he's saying is Roman Empire equals the devil. The devil is the dragon is also the Roman Empire is the devil.
Right. He's tying those two concepts together. And to me, I think that the woman is also supposed to be two concepts tied together, but I don't think it's the Jewish people and the Virgin Mary. I think it's Eve and the Virgin Mary. Because, okay, so clearly the author is tying two specific concepts in one. You just said it. Satan and the Roman Empire. The author is making a direct connection between the biblical story of Satan and specific actions of the Roman Empire. There is also specific reference to Mary in this chapter when she flees to the desert. I think it is tying in Eve as the person who gave birth to the entire human race, and Satan's pursuit of Eve in order to get her to sin in the Garden of Eden.
So that makes sense to me, in that Satan in the Garden of Eden is a corrupting force.
Pursued Mary, right, or pursued Eve is how I would see that interaction.
And you could also say that the Roman Empire's imperial rule over Judea was also corrupting, in that the Romans were not monotheistic. The Romans were polytheistic. They were idol worshippers.
If the dragon is referring to two things, both Satan and the Roman Empire, and Jesus is being talked about in two different ways, like in this passage, he's being spoken about as Messiah, Son of Man, and also as the Son of God, then why isn't the woman dualistic as well? It just kind of makes sense.
Right.
So other futurists, the ones that really hate Catholics, tend to point away from Mary and identify the woman of Revelation 12 as the church, all believers, the future bride of Christ. But the baby still is Jesus, which does not sit right with me, because the church did not birth Jesus into the world. Sometimes they will fix this by referring to the child as end times believers that will rule the world with Jesus in the millennium. And I think that's a bit nutty, because this is pretty clearly Jesus.
It would be the other way around.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you could say that Jesus gave birth to the church.
Yeah, you could.
And maybe they're saying, oh, well, the church age, if this is the church, then the church age will bring about the return of Jesus. Like, that's the best I can do with that. That's kind
of the direction that some people take it. I just, I'm not a fan.
That just doesn't fit. I think that if it were, that there is very clearly a better interpretation of this, and you really have to kind of fudge the numbers and jiggle it back and forth a bit to try to make the puzzle piece fit.
Which nobody ever does with the Book of Revelation.
No one's ever done that before. Everybody has just been, best faith interpreting this and not tried to read something else into this to serve their own purposes, whatever that may be.
Right. So in chapter 13, we're continuing this extended vision metaphor interlude thing, and we get reintroduced to the Antichrist. I was telling you last time about how these interludes between judgments are not strictly chronological. Like, whether the woman in Revelation 12 is Mary or the Jewish people or the early church or whoever, all of that is talking about something that has already happened at the time of writing Revelation. And Satan was cast out of heaven before John wrote Revelation. It is a flashback. It's chronologically happening at this massive scale over thousands of years. as opposed to the other events of the tribulation, which happened on a strict 7-year schedule. So if you take my interpretation that this woman is both supposed to represent both Mary and Eve, and the labor of her childbirth is human history before the birth of Jesus, that is, at the very minimum, 4,000 years.
That's a long labor.
And that makes sense when you think about during that time, there is a war in heaven. The dragon pursues the woman. We're seeing a huge amount of time condensed into one vision. And then we have the Antichrist introduced, which people really want to fit into the strict 7-year schedule of Revelation. So we've had reference to the Antichrist in Thessalonians, in Daniel, and most likely in the Revelation chapter 4 with the 4 horsemen. But this is where futurists think we get his backstory during this interlude. A beast rises up out of the sea with 7 heads and 10 horns and 10 crowns on the 10 horns. So looks a lot like Satan, but not identical, because Satan had, wait, how many horns? Okay, a beast rises up out of the sea with 7 heads and 10 horns and 10 crowns on the 10 horns. So very similar to Satan the dragon, but not identical. Satan the dragon had 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on the 7 heads. The Antichrist has 7 heads and 10 horns and 10 crowns on the horns. Sure. One of the 7 heads appears to be mortally wounded and about to die, but it heals in a way that appears miraculous and causes the world to be amazed. The world begins to worship this dragon, the Antichrist, which gives him power. Political power is given to the beast for 42 months, which is 3.5 years, 1260 days.
Maybe this head being wounded and recovering could be in reference to the revolt in Judea that was successful until the Romans struck back and then they burned Jerusalem. Possibly.
Yeah, absolutely. That particular revolt, the famine that led up to it, the revolt itself, the consequences of it, all of those things are really, really commonly associated with the preterist point of view of Revelation. Another common interpretation is that the 7 heads represent 7 kingdoms. So Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome, with the 7th head being the future revived Roman Empire, which kind of tracks because right now, in 2024, the Roman Empire could be described as wounded badly enough to appear dead. We even refer to Latin as a dead language. So if there were a symbolic or a literal revival of the Roman Empire, that could fulfill potentially both the 7th head and the healing of the 6th head.
So question, would it be futurist? Like if you were super paranoid about New World Order conspiracy theories, like the kind like Alberto Rivera, Jack Chick, that kind of thing. Would you see revival of the Catholic Church? I don't want to say revival of the Catholic Church, but like a Catholic one world government taking over as the Roman Empire making a comeback under the guise of the New World Order? Or
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So actually hold that thought for a minute because it ties into the next thing. In chapter 13, verse 11, we get introduced to the earth beast, who has 2 horns like a lamb and speaks like a dragon. This beast is often referred to as the false prophet. So what we're setting up is the unholy trinity of Revelation. So in Christian belief, we have the Trinity of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. This is the unholy trinity of the book of Revelation. We have Satan, the devil, the Antichrist, and the false prophet. The false prophet performs signs and wonders and directs people to worship and follow the first beast, the Antichrist. And Satan allows the Antichrist to be worshipped in proxy for Satan. All of the worship that goes to the Antichrist ends up getting passed through to Satan. It's in return, Satan gives the Antichrist magical powers.
Okay, so if you're like a Bob Larson type and you're seeing Satan everywhere in rock and roll music, in popular culture, in whatever, then you're saying, oh, well, when you are watching MTV, you're actually worshiping Satan. When you go to I don't know, an Iron Maiden concert, you are actually worshiping Satan.
Right.
Because it's by proxy. Okay.
Sorry. Oh, this is how it ties into the Roman Empire. A lot of Protestants would say the earth beast, the false prophet, is the Pope. So the earth beast has 2 horns like a lamb. Have you seen the Pope do like the peace symbol with his hand? It's not the Nixon fingers apart peace symbol, but there's another one that the Pope will do.
Yeah, it
kind of looks like the Hunger Games symbol if you put your ring finger down. Also, this was the reason that I wasn't allowed to make a peace sign with my fingers as a kid, because I could be mimicking the false prophet. The other reason this gets associated with the Pope, do you remember Alberto Rivera informing noted Catholic Alberto Rivera
spoke to millions in Peru, in Nicaragua,
in a stadium that holds like 10,000 people.
That wasn't built until like 20
years after he made the speech. Yep, right. That guy. You remember how Alberto Rivera said that there was the white Pope is the guy that we all know about, but the black Pope is the Jesuit leader, and he has just as much authority as the actual Pope.
Yeah, it's the guy from Ghost.
Right. So when people believe that, they will say, oh, those are the 2 horns of the false prophet. The 2 horns are the Pope and the Jesuit leader.
Oh, okay. So it's symbolical where it's, okay, 1, 2, and then that's the 2, and they're sharing power. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but there have been some like 250 popes or more. How do they know which pope is going to be the false prophet? And also, isn't it like, it would be blasphemous also for a Catholic Church leader, like a pope, to declare themselves to be a prophet?
Right. So the one that is the false prophet is the one that just happens to be in charge when Jesus comes back. So, or when the Antichrist comes to power. Basically, the idea is Jesus doesn't even know when Jesus is coming back, right? Because Jesus says that, I don't even know the day or the hour, my Father knows. So if Jesus doesn't even know when Jesus is coming back, Satan definitely doesn't know. So Satan would always have to have at least one guy ready to be the Antichrist and one guy ready to be the false prophet. So if you're following Chick and Alberto Rivera with their extreme paranoia of Catholics, it makes sense that the Pope would there's always a false prophet ready because it's always just the Pope because, he's a Pope. So he's already sold out to Satan because we hate Catholics.
Okay, so Satan's always got somebody keeping the seat warm.
Exactly. And this goes for the Antichrist as well. I've heard a lot of different ideas about who historical Antichrists would have been. But pretty much anybody who had a lot of power and or was a bad guy. So you could hear Alexander the Great, you could hear William the Conqueror, you could hear Hitler, just a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking like it's no wonder that these conspiracies were so big in like the late 70s, early 80s, because you had JP2, and JP2 was a guy where they're like, oh, this guy's coming and he's bringing peace.
Yeah.
That would be somebody that they would be looking at because they would see, oh, well, now he's going out to Poland, and he goes out to Poland, and then Poland decides they don't want to be communist anymore.
The way that this often plays out in Revelation fan fiction is that the Catholic Church will support the Antichrist as he rises to world power, and the governments of the world are made completely secular, and then because Catholicism is made the one world religion. So kind of a double-barreled secular and religious one world system. So that's how it plays out in the fan fiction. And if you go back and read chapter 12 and 13 of Revelation, you may notice that a lot of that is not in there.
No, I didn't see that in there.
What is actually in there is that the false prophet makes everyone get the mark of the beast in their right hand or in their foreheads, and makes it so that nobody can make any financial transactions of any kind without that mark. The false prophet, Pope or not Pope, is an extension of the Antichrist. He's his right-hand man. He's his hype man. And it's the false prophet who brings the enforcement for the mark of the beast.
So in A Thief in the Night, this was the Imperium.
Yes, correct. So let's go take up the offering. We're going to come back and talk about the mark of the beast, and I hope I'll be able to help some people deconstruct it. There's a lot to dig into when we get back.
Fantastic.
Hey, Sadie here. If this is your first time listening to the Leaving Eden podcast, make sure you go back and check out episode 57. It's a primer episode for new listeners. That episode tells my personal story and gives you all the terms and information that you'll need to know going forward. Also, check out our cult true crime series, The First Family of Fundamentalism, so that you can get the whole cult story. If you like our show, you can support us by joining our Patreon, where we have extended and uncensored episodes as well as other bonus content available. You can also join in the discussion in our Facebook group. That group is called Eden Exodus. Tell a friend, tell a family member, tell your worst enemy. The Leaving Eden podcast is a fully independent podcast, and we really appreciate your support. Now, back to the show.
We are back from our break. We talked about the Antichrist. We talked about the false prophet, the beast. We are here to talk about the mark of the beast. Not the Iron Maiden song, but the actual mark of the beast.
Right. Although it is the Iron Maiden song is in my head now. So let's talk about the mark of the beast.
666 or 616.
I'm going to get to that. So I'm going to read from King James, Revelation chapter 13, verse 16. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell save that he had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. So this is Nero. This is absolutely Nero. But that doesn't work for the fundies.
Oh, because it's got to be in the future.
Right.
And it can't have already happened. Okay.
So this number of the beast is reported in most texts as 666. There are some very old copies of Revelation that report the number as 616. And it turns out the name Nero can be spelled in Hebrew two different ways. And if you spell it one way in Hebrew gematria, it is 666. And if you spell it the other way, it is 616. So this is very clearly supposed to be Nero. Unless
that's just a ruse. No, that is a very logical explanation for 666 being the number of the beast.
But if you're a futurist, the Antichrist hasn't come yet, so you have to do some weird math to make Barack Obama or Vladimir Putin or whoever else fit into 666.
Yeah, I mean, lately, you know, which the one that I've seen, Taylor Swift.
What?
Yeah. When we were doing the research for this episode, I spent literally like an hour and a half typing Taylor Swift into the gematria calculator to see if I can make it say 666 or 616. Like, I've tried so many different like Taylor Swift lyrics, like variations on Taylor Swift. Like I tried Taylor Allison Swift. I tried Taylor Swift Kelsey in case she and Travis get married. I tried Taylor Allison Swift Kelsey, and you know, and just like no beans.
Nothing.
But I've seen ones out there that have been something like the name of our idol is Taylor Allison Swift, and then or some like that, where if like you figure out how many you need, and then it's like it's like proof texting, but
right.
with number calculations to try to make it 666.
So while you were doing that, I did go back and look at, I was trying to remember why we were all so extra freaked out about Obama being the Antichrist other than the racism. I remembered from back then that the new motorcade car that he had custom made was referred to as the Beast.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that scared the shit out of us.
I saw that. Actually, that's such an interesting vehicle.
Oh yeah, I watched a documentary or something about it. The thing is that they called it the Beast, and then this whole crucial part of the Antichrist narrative is that the Antichrist receives what appears to be a mortal wound, but then miraculously revives. So people were trying to tie those two things together, like, oh, this is the vehicle, so it would look like whoever was riding in the vehicle was killed, but they would be able to miraculously survive because of the power of the beast. Get it?
Oh, so if somebody tried to shoot at the beast, but it would be fine. Oh, okay,
Right.
I get you.
So this is why it freaks
That's a
people out.
cop out.
Yeah. Barack Hussein Obama does in fact have 18 characters, and 18 divided by 3 is 6. As I pointed out before on this podcast, so does Ronald Wilson Reagan.
I mean, and Ronald Wilson Reagan did get a near fatal injury.
Is what I'm saying.
And then he came back and everyone was like, wow, he's okay.
Right, exactly. Obama's birthday was actually just as big of a deal to certain parts of the IFB as birtherism itself. So I know, like, a lot of people were flipping out about where was Obama actually born? Is something birth certificate? I'm a racist.
Oh yeah, that's how Donald Trump became famous for talking about politics.
Right.
Was the birther thing.
But within the IFB, the day he was born was just as big of a deal. Like, obviously, the IFB thought he wasn't born in the United States because they didn't want to elect him because of racism. But Obama's birthday is August 4th, 1961. And there was a ton of discussion in the IFB about, well, what if he really was born in America, but they won't show us the birth certificate because his real birthday is June 6th, 1966. Or August 6th, 1966.
Oh, interesting. So they're trying to make it be 666.
Right. Like, what if it doesn't matter where he was born? What if he really was born here, but they're hiding his birthday because he was born sometime in 1966?
I mean, that's...
Well, and because Obama looked very young when he was one of the youngest presidents, I believe, at the time of election.
He was like 48 or 49 or something when he got elected. Yeah, he was 40. So he was born in 61, in August of 61, and he was elected in 2008. So he would have assumed office at the age of 48.
Right. And he did look really young at the time he took office. And I think Kennedy was the only younger president, if I'm not mistaken. I think Kennedy, I know that Kennedy is the youngest president ever, but I think Obama is the second youngest.
Right, because he'd only been elected to Senate a couple of years prior.
Right, I know, because my church was campaigning for Alan Keyes, who was his opponent in Senate. Oh,
because you were in Illinois.
Because I was in Illinois when Obama. I had been in a room with Obama because we visited. Oh, wow. Yeah, because we visited the state capitol when he was a state senator.
Oh yeah, I saw him speak. He in 2008 when he was on his presidential campaign, and I remember him talking for a long time about Hillary Clinton wanting a gas tax holiday or something, and agreeing with John McCain about a gas tax holiday. And it was in like May of, and I'm like, this means nothing to me. Talk about hope and change.
So anyway, the birtherism in the IFB was what was his actual birthday, not where was he actually born. So that's fun. I knew a lady who was pregnant during June 2006, and she was terrified that she was going to give birth on June 6th, 2006. And as silly as that sounds, I would have been scared too.
Wait, what? Hold on. So if it could be, there's no 666 area code, is there?
Probably not. Probably because of this.
Is there a 616 area? Hold on.
Yeah, there's a 616 area code.
616 area code. Let me look this up.
Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Who do we know in Grand Rapids?
Holland, Michigan. Holy shit. Jack Scott. So Tim LaHaye and Jerry B. Jenkins, the authors of the Left Behind series, did speak out to say that they do not believe the Antichrist will be American, that they think he will more likely be European, and therefore they don't think that Obama is the Antichrist. Thanks, guys.
Why do they think he's going to be European?
They didn't say why. In the article that I read, I think they just really have it out for the EU. A lot of fundies are really scared of the EU.
Why? The EU is not a scary entity.
Because it's a one world government. And they have high taxes. Scary.
Yeah, and they're banning they're banning internal combustion engines by 2035, and then they're gonna put tracking devices in all of the electric cars so they can shut them down when they want. I don't know.
Right.
This conspiracy nuts just get more and more and more and more. Like,
that's the thing about technology is it makes the more technology there is, the more the people who believe in conspiracies struggle.
You know, when you're reading like a thriller book, when you're reading like the Da Vinci Code and you're like, ooh, I think I figured out the puzzle. That's got to be how these people feel when they're just like, oh, but what if he was born in America? But he was born on June 6th and not August 6th. Ooh, I figured it out. Like,
yeah. I am not going to discuss the times that I have thought I was that person figuring something out.
I would love to hear like a top 10 rundown of Sadie's best, like, I think I figured out this conspiracy theory.
I was scared to predict the rapture because I thought I would get cursed. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. We can make a lot of people fit the 666 clue or 616. The big specific clue about the Antichrist, other than the number 666, is that the false prophet forces people to take the mark of the beast on their right hand or their forehead. And without it, you cannot buy or sell.
Was this like a thing in ancient Rome that you had to, or was that just like, oh, you have to be a Roman citizen, or?
So it could be a lot of different things. If you're looking at Nero as the definite Antichrist here, Nero had new coins printed that had his face and his name on them and made them the official currency. So you couldn't buy or sell without his name.
That's a normal thing to do.
I mean, it's not that odd. We have presidents on ours.
Yeah, but none of them are the current president.
True.
They do like past presidents that they're like trying to honor people.
Sure.
Or I guess they'll put Queen Elizabeth on the money
Right.
when she was alive. But
Yeah, or I guess Charles will be on the money now.
yeah,
Does not motivate me to go back to Canada. But
kind of a downgrade.
I know. I wonder if I still have any Queen Elizabeth money. Anyway.
They can't just reprint all the money and take all the Queen Elizabeth money out of circulation. That would take so long.
Well, especially in Canada because it's plastic.
Yeah, Canada money is plastic and it's got kids playing hockey on it.
And it's like there's like windows in it.
There's see-through.
Yeah.
Well.
It feels weird. Anyway, if you look at the Antichrist as being Nero, that's a pretty cut and dry explanation. You couldn't buy or sell without the official currency, which had his face and name on it. Literally his mark. As we saw in the Thief in the Night movie, before the rise of credit cards and computer chips, this was interpreted as an actual mark, something like a brand or a tattoo in the skin of a person's hand or forehead, without which people would not be allowed to buy or sell anything. So in fiction from 50 years ago, it's often portrayed as something literal. And this identifies Christians to the one world government mean, scary agent men, because it would be obvious that they don't have a mark on their hand or their forehead. Barcodes caused an early mark of the beast panic when they first came into use in the 1970s. Barcodes do use the number 6, as well as other numbers. And there was an urban legend that 666 is hidden in every barcode somewhere by people who, like me, don't know how barcodes work. The inventor of the barcode has come out and asserted that there is no 666 hidden in every barcode, and that he did not invent the barcode in cahoots with Satan. But he does seem to find it humorous that his first, last, and middle names each have 6 letters.
This is, I believe, why Hobby Lobby doesn't have barcodes on any of their items.
This is rumored to be why Hobby Lobby doesn't use barcodes. I actually don't believe that. I believe that Hobby Lobby doesn't use barcodes because it makes it easy to falsify inventory and not ever properly keep track of what is in the store, which provides a nice cover for shipping tiles that are actually illegal or stolen antiquities.
I think that makes a lot more sense than just being afraid of the mark of the beast. But I feel like saying, oh, we're afraid of the mark of the beast is a insane cover story for actually what you're actually doing, which is smuggling in artifacts that you're buying from. Oh, man.
Credit cards were also pointed to as a potential mark of the beast when they first became popular. But things really heated up when people started talking about and learning about microchips. Microchips are it. As far as the mark of the beast goes, a lot of people still believe that the mark of the beast will be a computer chip implanted in people that basically allows them to use their credit cards or identification anywhere, anytime. Something like tap pay, but embedded in your hand.
Is Elon Musk the Antichrist for trying to put computer chips into people's brains with Neuralink?
Ugh. That's a good question. When he got in that like horrible car wreck, is that the mortal wound that he survived? This led to massive conspiracy theories about the COVID vaccine.
Of course.
Many companies told their employees, in order to work here, you need to get the vaccine. And there were stores as well that asked people to either wear a mask or get the vaccine. And that freaked people out because masks go on your face and your vaccine goes in your arm. So that kind of seems like right-handed forehead, even though it isn't. And people thought, oh, that means they're putting a microchip to track you in the vaccine and you can't buy or sell without it. So this is the mark of the beast. This is actually really sad to me. I know of people who lost really good jobs because they refused to get the vaccine because they thought it was the mark of the beast. I will say, though, I happily got the COVID vaccine and continue to get boosters as on schedule. I'm very thankful as somebody who has asthma, I'm incredibly thankful for the COVID vaccine. But if it became an option to have my credit card in my hand, I would probably be too superstitious and not be able to do it. Feel free to cancel me for telling my kids' doctors to put any vaccine in there. Go for it.
Just shoot them up. Like, what are we putting in there? Oh, that's just B vitamins. Give them the Captain America serum. Give them the Super Soldier serum. Give them the HGH.
Just not Compound V, but all the other ones.
Whatever they gave to Giannis to make him giant, give my kid that. I want to raise like a generation of ball players. I looked it up on the Gematria website, and apparently, if you misspell Pfizer with two F's, so it's Pfizer, literally PFF Pfizer with two F's, then it comes out to 666.
Can you get a misspelling of Pfizer to come out to 616?
So, according to gematrix.com, which is it's gematrix.com, so it's like Gematria Matrix.
Right.
If you misspell Barack Hussein Obama, if you misspell Barack with a Q instead of a K, so it's it's a CK, right?
Right.
BARACK. No, if you misspell that Barack BARAQ and you misspell Hussein with one S instead of two S's and you put an H on the end of Obama, then it comes out to 616. So Barack with a Q, Hussein with one S instead of two S's, and Obama with OBAMAH, Obama. Then it comes out to 616. Wow. I swear, whoever figured that out thought they were cooking. They thought they were cooking. They're like, I got it. I figured it out.
Crazy that Revelation predicted that, but only with a unique anglicized misspelling of Obama's name.
Do you remember the Yvonne et Niage, the Simpsons episode where they join a boy band and it's like when he's got the nameplate that says LT and then she and he flicks the name tag and there's a little tab that's covering up the period, so LT is actually lieutenant.
Yes.
It's a Navy conspiracy. That's how we are.
Yes.
I also typed in "Make America Great Again" and that didn't work either. So, for what it's worth, Trump is apparently not the Antichrist either.
I mean,
we don't know. It's possible.
No, I just think that Trump is a better candidate for the false prophet because he could be like the forerunner, because in Christian history, you have John the Baptist, who is the forerunner for Jesus. So I would be more likely to, if I were going to make an end times conspiracy theory about Donald Trump, to say that he is either the false prophet or the forerunner of the Antichrist.
We're going to eventually have an episode where we talk about like theories about who the I bought a book on Amazon called Gorbachev, The Real Antichrist Has Come, I've got it right here, by a man named it's Gorbachev, Has the Real Antichrist Come? ? By Robert W. Fade, and it's got a picture of Gorbachev on here, and then it's also got a picture of like them nailing Jesus up on the cross, and he says that like the chances of Gorbachev not being the Antichrist are so low that it's almost impossible. Yeah, so we're going to talk about that. I think we're probably going to do like Trump, Obama, and I guess Mikhail Gorbachev for whatever reason. I think that would be fun.
Okay.
Email us with your Antichrist conspiracy theories and who you think the Antichrist is. But make sure, don't make it too realistic. Make it like, I don't know, the Antichrist is one of the Real Housewives or something, and then we can have a laugh about it.
Yeah, I was gonna. You said the Antichrist is, and the first person that came to mind is who is that guy from the Backstreet Boys or something who was on The Circle? Lance Bass. He's from one of those boy bands. I don't know which one.
But he wasn't on. He was in NSYNC, but he wasn't on The Circle. His assistant was on The Circle.
That's right. Anyway, I don't know why he popped into my head. Antichrist is exposed. Everybody has to get the mark of the beast to buy or sell. The 144,000 that we talked about previously are also given a seal on their foreheads. So you remember when I talked about the 144,000, and some people think they're metaphorical and it's just supposed to represent all of the believers, and then most literalists are like, no, that's not what it literally says. It literally says 144,000 Jewish virgins. That's specifically who it's about. It's not about all believers. What are you talking about? They are all given a mark from God on their foreheads to protect them. But the fan fiction about Revelation usually extrapolates this to mean that all Christians will have a mark from God on their foreheads so that they can identify each other. People also frequently believe that this mark will be invisible to non-believers so that Christians can go undercover and do spy for Jesus. And I would just like to state that none of that is in there.
That's kind of fun, though. It's kind of like, Tim and Jim, where they're sneaking Bibles into Romania.
Right. It's one of those things that gets a lot of airtime in tribulation fiction for obvious reasons, but when it comes to it, it's not in there.
I mean, you've got to have there be something for the characters to do.
Right.
Otherwise, like, it's just them sitting around waiting for Jesus to come back, and that's not an interesting story, really, at all. Right.
So in chapter 15, we have the reaping of the earth and the winepress of God, which is blood.
Ugh.
This calls back to both Isaiah and Joel, where God's judgment is talked about using the metaphor of reaping or the winepress. Interestingly, there's only one thing that the IFB really tend to latch onto from this chapter, and that is the specific numerical detail about the blood flowing unto the horse bridles by the space of 1,600 furlongs. And they ignore everything else in this chapter, which actually seems more helpful. The text in the end of chapter 14 specifies 2 reapings, actually. So one is done by, quote, one like unto the Son of Man, who is seated on a white cloud and wearing a golden crown, which kind of seems Jesus-y to me. And then the second reaping is done by, quote, another angel. So there's this one reaping is done by Jesus, and then another reaping is done by somebody else. And then the grapes go into the wine press, and Jesus stomps the grapes, and the blood flows everywhere. This kind of seems like a mid-trib rapture to me.
So is the reaping when they're taking the people up to heaven? Because he's reaping the earth. Reaping is what he has sown, and he has sown the belief in mankind.
And there's all those verses specifically about the believers will face tribulation, but believers will not face the wrath of God. And immediately after this, the next verse of the next chapter, chapter 16, I heard a great voice out of the temple saying to the 7 angels, "Go your ways and pour out the vials of the wrath of God upon the earth."
Okay, so they're not going to face the wrath. Okay, so it's not going to be post.
Right. So, I mean, there is a place, I'm going to discuss a place where I think a potential post-tribulation rapture is also in scripture. But this is incredibly supportive. Like, I didn't expect to find the rapture in Revelation, and I haven't. But I was told that it was at the beginning of Revelation. And there are several credible places that could potentially be referring to the rapture in Revelation. I don't think that they are, but you could interpret it that way. But none of them are at the beginning of the tribulation. There's like 3 in the middle of the tribulation and then 1 at the end. It's wild to me. And I still don't really believe in the rapture. But if it was going to happen, it would be mid-tribulation. And I can't believe I'm saying that.
Although I suppose that maybe, because last time we talked about how much scarier it is if you're a believer to have a pre-trib rapture, because there's not going to be a warning.
Yeah.
But if it's a mid-trib rapture, if you're everybody else who's not one of the believers, then that's maybe scarier, because then you're going to interpret literally everything that, you could be going through, the world could be going through as, ooh, the rapture is coming.
Right. And I still, I think if God wanted, okay, let's say this is, more for the believers listening to the podcast, the Christian believers, and I get that, but the rest of y'all hang with me for a minute here. Let's say it's all true, Jesus is coming back. If the Bible is all true, the Word of God and all that, if God wanted us to really overthink about exactly when and what the rapture is going to be, I think they would have told us more about it and not been so vague. I think if you are going to be a person who believes in an omnipotent, omniscient God who controls the entire universe with great care and exactness, if they wanted us to think about this, they would not be so freaking vague.
Also, I think that there wouldn't be a portion in there where they said, really don't think about this too hard. If you're thinking about this really hard, you're overthinking it. Just don't try to interpret this.
Yes.
It says that in there, but that's not a commandment for you. Even though every commandment for every person that's ever been given to anybody by anybody in the Bible is a commandment for you personally for all time.
Right. But not that one.
But not that one.
That is for you specifically. I'm not saying there is or isn't a rapture, because I'm really not sure, but I will tell you that the mid-trib is more scripturally supported. Chapter 15, is some description about the angels who have the 7 last plagues, the plagues of the wrath of God. Chapter 16 tells about the final 7 judgments, sometimes referred to as either bowl judgments or vial judgments. Side note, I was feeling really confused because in my mind, a bowl and a vial are very different things. A bowl is shallow and wide, and a vial is narrow and tall, like what you would see a scientist using for experiments. So I did look it up in Greek because I could, and vial and bowl in the original language meant pretty much the same thing. It's a fine translation either way, and I was really overthinking it, which is not the answer we usually get when I look something up in Greek. The first vial judgment. Here we go. Those who worship the beast and have the mark break out in boils.
Ooh.
Second vial, the sea becomes like blood and everything in it dies. Third vial, the rivers and fountains become blood. Note that this echoes the second and third trumpet. The second trumpet was a third of the sea becomes blood, and then the third trumpet was a third of the rivers become blood. So the second and third vial, or the whole ocean, the whole sea becomes blood, and all of the rivers and fountains become blood. Also note that in earlier Revelation fan fiction, you would see the vial judgments go very, very quickly, which is why earlier Revelation fan fictions tended to place the middle point of the tribulation back closer to the end of the seal judgments, or even on the third or fourth trumpet judgment, rather than the middle point being after the trumpet judgments. There are a lot of reasons for this. Nobody really agrees on exactly when the midpoint of the tribulation is in reference to the seals and vials and all that. But one reason that people interpreted it differently, like 50 or 100 years ago, is that all water on Earth becomes undrinkable without advanced filtration systems at the time of the second and third vial judgment. So before we had those advanced water filtration systems, people might theorize that the end has to come very quickly after the second and third vial judgments. Well, modern fanfic writers might come up with a way to filter this blood into something that could sustain humans for the rest of the Great Tribulation. I'm pretty sure in the Left Behind books they drank bottled water. I don't remember. That is stuck in my head. I think that is the answer, and I can't really remember.
But bottled water is just, they're bottling the municipal water supply of some city.
Right, but
like,
they had enough.
Every bottled water company is just like the company that bottles that water and sells it, signed a water rights deal with the municipality and just bottles water from whatever river or something.
Yeah, I know. But but if you think about it, 90% in this scenario, 90% of the Earth's population has either been raptured or died. So it makes sense that maybe the amount of bottled water existing in the world would be enough to keep humanity going for a while.
Or maybe they just got good desalination plants.
Right.
No, because what I was thinking was that when the Romans did the siege of Jerusalem and they destroyed the temple, what they also did was they sowed salt into the earth to basically make it so nothing could ever grow there again for generations.
Right.
And the result of this is it, destroyed plant life, destroyed the water supply, because then you have all that salt going into the water, which kills the things that live there. That is also a potential candidate for what goes on here. For the rivers becoming blood, the earth becoming scorched. I mean, and they literally did burn the earth.
The fourth vial, the sun is given the power to scorch people, and it becomes very hot on the earth. The fifth vial is poured out on the seat of the beast, and the kingdom of the beast is full of darkness. People are in great pain because of the sores from the first vial, but they blaspheme God and do not repent. This fifth vial is really interesting to me, because thinking back about what we were talking about deconstructing in the last episode about the strong delusion of 2 Thessalonians, if you're not saved by this point, you cannot get saved after this point. If it were referring to the end times, and if it were referring to something that happens after the rapture, I think the strong delusion belongs chronologically after the reaping. If that is something that happens, that is the point at which people can no longer repent and be saved. If this were all true and prophetic and futurist and literal.
So that's your point of that's your event horizon.
Right. And I think it's really crazy to put that to place that strong delusion at the point of a pre-trib rapture.
Well, when you think of say, I want to say the book of Job, where Job is put through all of these trials and tribulations, but he doesn't curse God. He says, I wish my life were ended, right? Mm-hmm. So these are the people who they're being put through all these trials and tribulations, and they're the ones who are saying, yes, I will curse God.
Right. And it fits with the vast majority of church tradition that whether it's literal or representative, the seal and trumpet judgments are symbolic of God saying, no more Mr. Nice Guy, come to me or else. And then the vial judgments are God pouring out his wrath on those who will never come to him, no matter what. Now, you might be saying that's kind of mean of God. And I get that. I'm going to come back to that and deconstruct that when we wrap up the series. And this is one of 100 reasons that I don't necessarily believe this is literal and prophetic. But if this were literal and prophetic, if there were a rapture and a tribulation, the strong delusion from Thessalonians, if it were referring to the end times, would make a ton of sense starting at the beginning of the bowl judgments. And all of us fundy kids were freaking out for nothing. Anyway, sixth vial poured on the Euphrates River. The water is dried up. 3 unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouths of Satan, the Antichrist, and the false prophet. These spirits go to the kings of the earth to bring them to the final battle, which is the Battle of Armageddon. The 7th angel pours out his vial into the air. A voice comes out of the temple in heaven saying, "It is done." The great city, whatever that is, we're going to get to that in the next part, falls and splits into 3 parts. The wrath of God has fallen on earth. There is an earthquake, thunder and lightning and hail, and the next thing that happens is the actual second coming. But before we get there, we get another one of those interludes that we started off this episode with, where new characters are introduced. So let's take up the offering again. We'll get back. We'll talk about the last interlude, Armageddon, the marriage supper of the Lamb, the millennium, and the end of all things.
Cool.
So, yeah, we talked about the bowl judgments, and after the bowl judgments, we get yet another one of those interludes with mysterious characters that we get to try to figure out who they are. So, Revelation chapter 17, let's do it. Picks up after the last bowl judgment or vial judgment. One of the angels that had the 7 bowls pulls John aside and carries him away in the spirit into the wilderness. So it is once again spirit inception, because John was carried away in the spirit to heaven, and then now he's being carried away in the spirit from heaven to the wilderness.
Right. So if he's being carried away or called up in the spirit, then how is him being called up the rapture if he's being carried away now?
Right. That's one question. Another question is, so the typical IFB interpretation is, well, his body remained on Patmos, but his soul or his spirit went forward in time to see these things literally happen. Except for the interludes, which figuratively happened, but he literally saw them figuratively happen. It's a bit confusing, but John is carried away in the spirit into the wilderness, and he sees another specific vision. He sees a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which has 7 heads and 10 horns. She is elaborately dressed, and on her forehead is written her name. Please excuse this name. There's a slur for sex workers in it, but Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. The revelator is awestruck. The angel who took him to the wilderness offers to explain. He says, well, this is the beast that was and is not and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. And this did send me on a minor rabbit trail around the word perdition.
Who could have guessed?
You know, I've been really good this episode.
It's true. It's been me who's been off the rails.
I get a little rabbit trail as a treat.
Just a little one.
So this word, perdition, it's come up a couple times. It's here, but it's also in 2 Thessalonians, in that same passage that we've been wrestling with the trauma from over and over again. That same passage in 2 Thessalonians that seems to say, after the time of the Antichrist has come, people who have already received the gospel but not gotten saved will not be able to get saved. That God will send them a strong delusion. What people often interpret to mean the Antichrist in that passage is referred to as the man of sin, the son of perdition. And I personally don't think there's any reason to say the man of sin and the son of perdition is referring to one specific exact person, and it is the Antichrist. And that's it. And it has no other meanings. I think that's wild, because the text, that's not very literalist, because the text doesn't say it. So this got me thinking about the word perdition, and I wanted to go back and check, okay, is the Antichrist named as the man of sin or the son of perdition specifically? in Revelation. So I did a super quick Bible word search in the King James, and it turns out the son of perdition is never used to refer directly to the Antichrist. There is one person that is clearly referred to as the son of perdition. And it comes from a prayer that Jesus prayed in John chapter 17, where he says, I have kept all of the souls that you have given me, except for one, the man of perdition that must be lost so that scripture will be fulfilled.
Who's that?
Judas.
Judas.
Yeah. Yeah, I have kept all the souls you have given me, except for one, the man of perdition, who must be lost so that the scripture will be fulfilled. Judas had to sell Jesus out to the authorities so that Jesus could get killed and fulfill the prophecy. And then Judas died by suicide after, because he realized what a bad thing he had done. And then in Jesus Christ Superstar, you kind of hear more about what Judas might have been thinking, which is not in scripture, but it's a lot of fun. So that made me think, if the man of perdition in John 17 is pretty clearly about Judas, it's not a prophetic chapter. It's not, and it wouldn't make sense if you think, okay, maybe if Jesus has kept all of the souls that God has given him except for one, the man of perdition, and that's the Antichrist, then that's universalism. Because if Jesus has kept every soul except for the Antichrist, then everybody except for the Antichrist is going to heaven. So I'm sure you don't want to make the argument, if you're a fundy, that the man of perdition in John 17 is the Antichrist.
No, so you would say, I guess it would be the son of perdition.
Right.
But the son of perdition would be anybody who is like, I guess, like theologically or figuratively the son of Judas, who would be anybody who would deny Jesus.
Exactly.
Okay.
So the only other person that's referred to similarly in the New Testament, because this phrase is not in Revelation at all, it's in 2 Thessalonians and John 17. In John 17, it's 100% clearly about Judas. And in 2 Thessalonians, yeah, it prophesies a bad guy who is coming. But I kind of feel like the writer of Thessalonians is saying a bad guy who was just as bad as Judas.
Oh, okay. Because I do feel like I almost need like a glossary for all of these people and these terms and characters, because they do get kind of run together.
Yeah. I should have defined perdition. Perdition is a state of eternal punishment and damnation into which a sinful and unpenitent person passes after death.
Wow.
Hell. What people have done is they've taken that passage in 2 Thessalonians about the man of sin, the son of perdition, and unequivocally attached that phrase to the Antichrist in the book of Revelation, and connecting those words to specifically end time prophecy. I think, like, to me, this is not good text exposition. There is, if you read the passage in 2 Thessalonians, I'm opening my Bible because I'm getting passionate here.
Are you feeling slain in the spirit?
No, that's something else.
Is the Holy Spirit coming into you and filling you with passion?
Hold on. I might have got something wrong. Oh, there it is.
Sadie's gift of the Spirit is discernment.
Which means, okay. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or all that is that is worshipped, so that he is God, sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Remember ye not that when I was yet with you, I told you these things? Skipping down, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this cause God shall send them strong delusion, that they should believe a lie. This passage is connected. The reason that people think 2 Thessalonians 2 is about the rapture, or the book of Revelation, is that we identify that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, as the Antichrist. And that's what I take issue with.
But that's not the Antichrist. That's Judas, or somebody who's as bad as Judas, who's going to betray them.
The Thessalonians that a bad guy is coming. There is no textual reason to say this bad guy is the Antichrist from Revelation. There's much more textual reason to say this bad guy is a guy like a betrayer, like Judas.
Unless, of course, the bad guy that he's saying is a bad guy that's coming was Nero, who in fact would be the Antichrist.
Sure. And I don't know, did Nero sit in the temple of God and show himself that he is God?
I mean, he was the Roman emperor.
Yeah. Did he put a mark on people's hands or foreheads that they couldn't buy or sell without? Did he persecute the Savior?
Very clearly, I don't know. But in other hand, but you know what? If you look at it like sideways, you might be thinking that it's Obama. So
right. But here's what I'm saying. We have tied First and Second Thessalonians, the bit about potentially the rapture in First Thessalonians, and the bit potentially about the Antichrist in Second Thessalonians. We have tied those things to Revelation, and to believe the IFB pre-trib rapture, premillennial, literalist, futurist interpretation of the book of Revelation, these verses are important to that viewpoint. These verses illuminate the timeline of what the IFB believe will happen during Revelation. What I am claiming is that specifically this passage in 2 Thessalonians, there is no good reason to say categorically, this is the Antichrist. That is the only person it's talking about. This is an end time prophecy.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, and that undermines.
Huh. That just undermines so it's just got
the existence of the rapture is what it undermines.
But wait, no, I thought the rapture was in the Olivet Discourse.
Okay, it sort of is. So the Olivet Discourse does say, I'm going to read some more of this. I'm sorry if I'm triggering anybody reading this much scripture. Olivet Discourse does say, immediately after the tribulation of those days, shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Which is way clearer. Like that is
that sounds
from
kind
Jesus.
Of rapture.
That sounds very much like a rapture. So yeah, that does sound like a rapture, and then that is probably what Paul was referencing in First Thessalonians when he wrote. Why do I not have this underlined in my high school Bible? That is weird. Sorry, I don't have this verse underlined. That's weird. Oh, there it is. 1 Thessalonians 4:16. For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with him in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. So that is the rapture prediction in 1 Thessalonians, and that absolutely seems like Paul is referencing what Jesus said, the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory, and gathering his elect from the four winds. When Jesus made that prediction, he also said 3 verses later, verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. So in the Olivet Discourse, Jesus predicted what reads to me as a post-tribulation rapture. But he also said whatever that thing was he was predicting, it was going to happen in the generation in which he was speaking. So it's one of two things. Either Jesus was predicting something, but not the rapture. He was predicting probably the destruction of the second temple, which did happen within a generation of when he prophesied it. Or Jesus was way off on his timeline. Why would Jesus promise that the rapture was coming in this generation if it was going to be at least 2,000 years? That doesn't make any sense.
Maybe he was talking about pre-Noah's flood generations.
Melchizedek lived to what, 1169?
I think so. Something like that.
Yeah.
That's
Deep Bible trivia. This is the kind of thing you get points for at church camp if you know.
that's I don't know. I'm trying to make it work.
How old did Noah live? How old did Melchizedek live? That kind of thing. So all I'm saying is the idea of the end of the world is going to happen and good is going to triumph over evil, that's in the Bible. Like, believe the Bible or don't, it's fine, but that it's in there. The idea that Jesus is coming back for his own is absolutely in there. But the idea that pre-trib rapture is so not in the Bible. It's hilarious to me. If there is a rapture, it's almost definitely mid-trib, and if not, it's post-trib. Just saying. And there might... the way that I see it, having actually read the text, is that it isn't so much of a rapture. It's like when Jesus comes back at the end of the world, he gets all the people.
So he's not literally like summoning everybody up to heaven, and you're gonna like, okay.
And also, there's a lot of good universalist readings of this, or where I fall, like pseudo-universalist. When Jesus talked about the man of sin in John 17, he was talking about Judas. And he was probably throwing shade at Judas by making a comparison between Judas and Antiochus IV Epiphanes.
How much of like Christian fundamentalist and theological belief can just be explained by this one dude's social circle being messy?
If you're willing to expand one dude's social circle to include his mom, his stepdad, his aunt, his uncle, and his cousin, then all of it.
I mean, it's just like how Dante would, he put people that he knew and didn't like in hell in his like Divine Comedy. And they were, even though these people were still alive at the time that he wrote it, and then now it's kind of tacitly secondary Christian canon. It's almost as if like, say Jesus were around now and he sent a text to somebody saying that dude is sketchy as hell. Right. And then many years from now, some translation says, well, sketchy means this man is unable to be drawn accurately. Like no man can depict him accurately because he is sketchy.
Because he is so evil.
Yeah, or sketchy as in like sketch like a drawing.
Right.
Like sketch like a bad draw. Like
but you can't picture him because the powers of evil make it impossible to draw a picture of him.
Yeah, and now suddenly that's part of canon. That's what I'm getting here.
Right. So canonically, Judas got Jesus killed was a part of the happenings that got Jesus killed, and Jesus knew that it was going to happen beforehand. So if you believe all that, it kind of makes sense that Jesus was like ahead of the game, holding a grudge, and compared Judas to Antiochus IV Epiphanes, who like at the time that this conversation went down, Antiochus Epiphanes was like the worst guy ever.
Why was he bad? What did he do?
Let's see. Well, he desecrated the temple.
Right.
Killed,
yeah.
It's the guy. So Antiochus IV is the Maccabean revolt.
Oh, okay. So that was with Hanukkah.
168, 167 BC. Yeah. So anyway, basically what I'm saying is, if you wanted to say somebody is a really, really bad guy now, you would say like Donald Trump is literally Hitler, right? Like that's what we associate with the literal worst guy ever. That's basically what Jesus said about Judas.
Man. He
compared him to like the worst guy ever from like, you remember that guy from like a few generations ago whose name is Mud? The worst guy ever. That is the comment that Jesus is making about Judas in context of Daniel, in context of recent history, in context of the connotations of the phrase man of sin or son of perdition or man of perdition. Jesus is like, there's somebody who's going to sell me out, and this guy is like literally Hitler. That's wow. What Jesus is saying. So when Paul says this in 2 Thessalonians, there's not a real great reason to think it is the Antichrist that he's talking about. Paul is talking about somebody else who is like literally Hitler.
Maybe, I don't know, maybe Jesus was just paranoid. And so he started turning on his friends and alienated them all to the point where Judas was like, you know what, this guy's, he's just like, he over his friend to the point where he would trade him to the Romans for 20 pieces of silver.
30.
Like, do you know how?
But dude, would you be paranoid if one day you just like gain consciousness on Earth and your mom tells you that you have no dad, your dad is God, and you're here to fulfill a bunch of prophecies, and then all of this stuff that starts matching, all this stuff starts happening to you, and you realize that it matches all the prophecies, and also you can heal people and walk on water. But you're familiar with these prophecies and you know the end of the prophecy is that your friend is going to sell you out and you're going to die a brutal death. Like, would that make you kind of paranoid? Right. So that makes me wonder, and this is not theology, please don't take this seriously, but it makes me wonder, maybe Judas sold Jesus out because of the Antiochus Epiphanes comment. Like, maybe Jesus made this comment about Judas and that made him so mad that he's like, you're going to call me literally Hitler? Fine, watch this. I'm going to sell you out to the Romans. The ties between Thessalonians in the book of 1st and 2nd Thessalonians in the book of Revelation are so much shakier than we were led to believe. It's just, and pre-trib rapture is so not in there. It's absolutely wild. So, I don't know if that makes people feel any better or deconstruct any, because of course I totally support people. Like, if what makes you feel good and healthy is there is no rapture or there is no God or there is no end times or whatever, I fully support that. But pre-trib rapture is like the last thing that's in there. So I'm really glad that Ruckman is dead and can't make a response to this podcast episode. Mystery Babylon the Great, dressed beautifully. She is sitting on a scarlet beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. She is drunken on the blood of the saints. There are a lot of interpretations of who she is supposed to represent. It's commonly seen as a political power rather than a religious one, although some fundies would hold that Mystery Babylon is the Catholic Church. So a man named Stephen Anderson, not that Stephen Anderson.
Really?
A different, smarter, but still fundamentalist Stephen Anderson.
Imagine being a fundie named Stephen Anderson and not being that Stephen Anderson.
I know.
And you're like, no, I've got to go by Steve H. Anderson or...
This is a different guy who is a much better writer, although he's still pretty far out there in fundamentalist. He is absolutely sure that Mystery Babylon is America. The angel actually interprets this metaphor for John. The angel says, the 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth, and there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet to come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but will receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. So
what?
The angel tells him the 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth.
Oh, okay. So Rome
sits on 7 mountains. Yes. The next chapter goes on to describe Babylon, outside of the metaphor of the woman, as a great city, a wealthy city, politically connected to all the kings of the earth. It's a center of commerce that deals in luxury goods. It has enriched the whole world with its commerce and trade. It's important to people who are futurists and literalists to identify who or what Mystery Babylon is. Because the whole thing is that Mystery Babylon is a great power up until the time of the last bowl judgment. And at that time, it finally falls and is destroyed. So if you are a pre-tribulation or mid-tribulation rapture believer, in order for the rapture to come, there has to be a Babylon somewhere in the world. You have to be able to point to some group or country or religion or organization and say, this is Mystery Babylon, who is so powerful right now, but it will fall after the tribulation. I think sitteth on 7 mountains is pretty darn clear, and this is a reference to Rome.
It could be San Francisco.
Sure. America is also a pretty common interpretation. I feel like I remember Jack Scott's interpretation being that this is America. You might also sometimes hear the Catholic Church, the United Nations, or the European Union as an interpretation of this. I think it's very clearly meant to be Rome, which is another point to preterism. So I found mid-trib rapture in here. I found post-trib rapture in here. I found preterism in here. I found historicism. The only thing that isn't in here is premillennial pre-trib futurist rapture.
Which happens to be the exact thing that the IFB believes. But the Bible is the word of God, and they never believe anything that isn't in the Bible.
Except for that Steven Anderson, the nasty one, who is a mid-trib rapture believer. I can't believe I agree with him on something. That's frustrating. Okay.
I mean, but that was sort of the thing. That was like our takeaway from when we talked about him, was he was talking about like different abortion or different birth control methods and how they technically work. And our thing was like, no, he technically understands how the pharmacology of how this works, like the mechanism of how this works. And he's wrong, but he's not insane. And that was our take.
And now I agree with him more on eschatology than I do other people, I guess. So I got one more like big thing to deconstruct before we finish up this episode, and that is the marriage supper of the Lamb. The marriage of the Lamb is celebrated in Revelation chapter 19. This is often considered a somewhat literal marriage ceremony between Jesus as the groom and the church, all believers, the corporate church as the bride. This is, of course, where we get things like Baptist bridalism, when people believe that only certain Baptists will be part of the bride of Christ. The phrase marriage supper of the Lamb appears in this chapter. And I was led to believe my entire life that the marriage supper of the Lamb is a literal banquet for Jesus and his bride, aka all saved people.
Is it a buffet dinner?
That is what I was told, but it is sure not. I mean, it is a buffet, actually. This also blew my mind.
Wait, are they serving lamb or is...
No, the lamb is Jesus.
So they're not serving lamb chops. Like, if they're having the marriage supper of the Lamb, do you think they'd serve lamb chops at the marriage supper?
Well, let me tell you what the marriage supper is.
Lamb gyro, lamb shawarma.
Let me tell you what the marriage supper is, because it is not a big buffet for Jesus and all the saved people. This chapter describes Jesus riding in on a white horse with all the armies of heaven on white horses behind him. And I'm quoting, "And I saw an angel standing in the sun, and he cried with a loud voice, saying to all the fowls that fly in the midst of heaven, Come and gather yourselves together unto the supper of the great God, that ye may eat the flesh of kings, and the flesh of captains, and the flesh of mighty men, and the flesh of horses, and of them that sit on them, and the flesh of all men, both free and bond, both small and great."
Wait, so everyone's getting eaten by birds?
That's the marriage supper of the Lamb.
That doesn't sound pleasant.
It's referring to the scavenger birds eating the carnage at the end of the great battle where Jesus wins.
Are you sure that isn't backwards, where it's like we're at the table and we're eating like birds, like chicken, turkey?
No, I just
duck,
read it to you,
goose.
literally. Because it says, "The marriage of the Lamb is come. Blessed are they which are called to the marriage supper of the Lamb." But it doesn't go on to describe a big buffet. It goes on to describe the fowls that fly in the midst of heaven, come and gather yourselves together unto the supper of the great God. Yeah. That may be disappointing to those of us who were kind of still hoping for the giant Baptist feast in heaven.
Yeah, with the tater tot casserole.
Right. I guess I'll have to just make tater tot casserole on earth. So, okay, blah, blah, blah. Jesus defeats the armies of the world. The beast and the false prophet are thrown into the lake of fire. Satan is chained and put in the bottomless pit for 1,000 years. Jesus reigns on earth for 1,000 years. This is the millennium. And after that, Satan is let loose for a little season to get one more chance at deceiving people.
As a treat.
Huh? Yeah, as a treat. The IFB view is that Satan gets to go after anyone who was born during the millennium, just so that Satan gets a fair shot at every person who ever lived.
Oh, so in a historicist view, is this metaphorical? Or is this, because this can't possibly be in reference to real events.
Right, not real events that have happened. I found a very detailed article from a historicist point of view that concludes that all of Revelation has been fulfilled except for this final battle. This article claimed that the Eastern Orthodox Church was the true Church of God, and the Battle of Armageddon and the Millennium are metaphors to refer to the end of the Catholic Church and all believers turning back to the Eastern Orthodox Church, turning back to God.
Okay. Weird.
So historicism, a lot of people who are into historicism would say, most of it has already been fulfilled, or all of it, except for we're waiting for the second coming. Because if you're a historicist who's not into pre-trib rapture, and you're willing to look at the dates as metaphorical, the seal judgments and the trumpet judgments and the bowl judgments are all historical events, and they're all metaphors for the different ways that God has tried to bring us back to him. And Jesus said he was coming back, and he's coming back one day, and the Battle of Armageddon will be fought. And all of those things just are metaphors for Jesus defeating evil, and we'll all go to be with Jesus in the end.
Yeah, I was also thinking about this because if you're a historicist, then the Roman Empire / the Catholic Church, not exactly the good guys. But you're more likely to be like an Orthodox Christian rather than being like a Protestant.
Well, no, they would be a Protestant because historicism was really popular in the time of the Reformation with people who didn't like the Pope.
Interesting. Okay, so that makes sense.
Yeah,
that
Martin
they didn't
Luther
like
was
the
a
Pope.
huge proponent of historicism.
Okay, well, maybe that explains some of the anti-Semitism in.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah. Oof.
Although preterism is worse. So
I mean, we don't win. That's the problem. Is that it was prophesized that that this guy would die, and we didn't even kill him, but we get blamed for killing him, even though his death it ended all of sin on earth and enabled people to go to heaven. But
yeah, it was the Romans.
It doesn't make a ton of sense.
Number one, it was the Romans. Number two, he humbled himself and became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross, wherefore God hath highly exalted him and given him a name which is above every name. Jesus consented to die. Sorry, that's my personal soapbox. Satan and his armies at the end so the millennium happens, and then Satan is let loose for a little while to try to get some more people, and he does win a bunch of people over. Satan and his armies fight Jesus again at the very end of the world, and Jesus wins again, and Satan is thrown into a lake of fire and brimstone, and he will be there forever. And then we have the Great White Throne Judgment. Everyone stands before God and is judged according to their works. But whosoever was not found written in the book of life is cast into the lake of fire. I still do not understand why people are judged according to their works if the only criteria that keeps you out of the lake of fire is being written in the book of life. And according to the IFB, works that you do cannot get you written in the book of life.
Wait, so is the book of Revelation works-based salvation, pro-works-based salvation?
I wouldn't go that far. I would say it's confusing.
Also, it's kind of messed up that you can survive the trials and tribulations and the Armageddon, the final battle, Satan coming back, and then God still might be like, actually, no, you're going into the lake of fire as well.
Yeah. Sashay away. So this is confusing. There's a new heaven and a new earth. God now dwells with humanity. God wipes away all tears from the eyes of the saved. There's no more death, sorrow, crying, pain, night. Sounds nice. It describes the city of God, 12 gates, pearls, gold. We've gone through this before. It's possibly important to note that the gates are canonically made out of individual giant pearls. This is important to some people. It gets used as a test of biblical literalism. And then chapter 22 is kind of a big summary of everything. Not a lot of new prophetic information. It describes the tree of life replanted on the shores of the river of life in heaven. Jesus states twice in this chapter, behold, I come quickly. I am coming soon. Which again leads me to feel like he either misspoke or had a punctuality problem, or I don't know. So the text wraps up with a warning. If you add to or take away from the book of Revelation, there will be great curses on you. The last note I have is that King James literalists, since that verse is right near the end of the Bible, King James literalists believe that if you add to or take away from this book, there will be curses on you. That this book applies to the whole King James Bible, not just the book of Revelation. And this is a verse that will get used to support King James onlyism. And then they go and add a bunch of stuff to the scripture. That's it. I'm done.
It's kind of crazy that they can just say, if you add to or take away anything from this book, then there will be a curse upon you.
I mean, we're going to talk next on the last episode of the series about how this book came into being, possibly.
Okay, so thank you guys so much for tuning into this one. Next week, I don't know what we're talking about. Are we talking about this Revelation again next week? Or
I think we're going to do the final episode of deconstructing Revelation, stuff that we haven't gotten to, and I hope being very comforting to everybody.
Yeah, that'll be good. And then we're going to be getting into Pride Month stuff, which is cool because we've recorded our first Pride Month episode already, and it's going to be a banger and a half. Can't wait to get that one out to you guys. Leaving Eden Podcast greatly appreciates your support. Subscribe to our Patreon for an extremely extended version of today's episode that it might be like, honestly, it might be an extra hour of content. I don't know. We'll see how it comes out in the edit. Leaving Eden Podcast Patreon. Go join our Facebook group. Follow us on social media. You can follow me at GAVRIELHACOHEN. You can follow the podcast at Leaving Eden Podcast. Sadie, your socials.
You can follow me on Instagram at Sadie Carpenter Music, and also on Threads now at Sadie Carpenter Music, and on TikTok at Sadie Carpenter 1.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in. You guys have a great day. Bye-bye.
But old rolling river of time, you've healed me in too many days. No regrets, no confusion, there'll be no pollution. I'm so thankful I've decided to change my ways. I'm so thankful I decided